Guppies to groupers, tropical and marine fish in the home aquarium. Your host, Paul Speece.
Most exciting hobby there is? You betcha, no question about it. This keeping of fish is really the thing. And if I can believe the letters and what we're hearing, there's more and more of us fish nuts joining the game every day. And along with that, a lot of remarks to the effect that, I found out about the show by accident. I heard about it from friends and I picked up late in the series, that kind of thing. Plus, I just feel, the old gut feeling that it's time for a review. So hang in there. No test in the morning. You don't have to sweat a thing. But we're going to talk about how do you keep these beauties alive? How do you keep them healthy and vibrant? And of course, the secret is start right. And that's what we're going to tackle today, starting right. Vigilance, watch them all the time. Awareness. And I grant you that looking at this big tank is not your typical home aquarium. This is not the kind of fish that the average hobbyist has around. Very large fish. For instance, you look at, like my friend Whitey down there at the corner. He's quite active for a catfish. That's Ictalurus lacustris, and a tremendous eater. You see the belly on him, it's always like that. He gets more than his share of the food. Very sensitive barbels on him, so he knows where everything is in that aquarium in terms of food. Old Ictalurus, old Whitey. Kids call him Whitey. There's another customer in here that is an aggressive eater. Old Rotten Ralph, but he hides a lot. Let me see what I can do to get him out of hiding. He's usually, here he is. There he is. Okay, Ralph, baby. That's a pike cichlid, Crenocicla lepidota. And that guy is really an aggressive eater. Well, why do I mention eating? Why is that of importance to us? Well, we're going to find out that success in the aquarium, as I've mentioned so many times, is in the feeding of the fish. Now, I'll feed this big tank in a second here, but let's face it, your aquarium is not going to look like this. It's probably going to look more like this one behind me here, which is full of little tetras and barbs and fish of that sort. So your feeding problem is a different kind of problem than mine. Or I have that problem that you have in here. That is, the problem is feed them right. So whether it's an aquarium like this, which is the typical small community tank setup, and, feed to suit the fish of that size, or whether it's an aquarium like this, and then feeding becomes a different problem, and I'll show you what feeding these monsters is like. Okay, boys, here we go. Like it or not, you've got to feed big fish live food. And they like it, as you can see there. No question about it that that's what they want and that's what they need. So when you get around to keeping fish this size, especially the cichlids and the big catfish, you're going to have to feed them like this. Garpike always gets his share, as you saw there, and that's the name of the game. These fish that live on the bottom of the watery world, they spend their entire life, one eye looking at what can I eat, and the other eye looking at what's trying to eat me. That goes on constantly. So feeding is part of the success of keeping fish. Good varied diet. The other one is good water quality, and that's what we're going to really tackle today. I might as well keep this over here. Okay, in order to be successful in keeping that home aquarium, as I said, very simple, get the water right. Now, how do you get the water right? Well, that's in the filtration. Now, when I say filtration, many people immediately think of something that takes lumps of dirt out of the water. Then you say, okay, what kind of filter are we talking about? The important notion here is not so much what kind of filter, but what kind of filtration. Now let me separate them. because filtration has got to do a number of things in the aquarium, and we'll find out as we get further into this that some filters do more than one kind of filtering. Let me just put down a couple of key words here in terms of filtration. First of all, we do want to keep the water clear. We do want to take out any floating lumps or what have you, whatever you want to call them. So we do want a physical filter. That's one kind of filter. Or again, let me stress that what we're talking about is the concept here of what's going on. Filtration, okay? So one kind of filtration is physical. Physical. And Uncle Albert says, I'm not sure exactly what you're saying. I'm saying, get the lumps out of the water. Get the dirt out of there. That's physical. Now, besides that, we all know, that, or at least people that have been into it, we charge a lot of the filters with charcoal. Now, the charcoal takes out some of the organic dyes, the kind of thing that discolors the water, that makes it get yellow as time goes by. Takes out some of the minerals that are in the water. A chemical filter. So that is pretty well understood. But the one type of filtration that is probably most critical to the success of the aquarium is different than these. And that's a biological filter. So, biological. Looked funny there for a minute, but I guess that's it. Biological. So these are the kinds of filtration. That is, this is what we're trying to achieve in the aquarium. Now, how are we going to go about achieving these things? Because they're all critical to the success of keeping fish. Some much more so than others. Okay, let's talk about achieving proper filtration. Now, when you set the aquarium up and have everything running and the water's in there, but there are no fish in there yet, that could stay like that for a long time, and except for dust possibly getting in there, it doesn't change. Put one fish in there and things start to happen to the water that we don't want. Now, if you're going to keep fish, you've got these things going on. The fish's droppings are polluting the water. So very simply, we've got to start taking care of everything in there. We've got to take care of dirt. We've got to take care of the discoloration. And primarily, we've got to take care of some rather toxic materials that come in from the urine. Now, that's enough of the cute words with respect to what's going on here. Let's take a look at some kinds of filters and see what they do. Well, the ones that you're probably most familiar with are filters of this type. Now, this particular one hangs on the outside of the aquarium. This type, which is a little bit different than that, sets inside of an aquarium, like so. Just sets on the bottom. And of course, I'm assuming now that we would have this set up and we would have gravel over it. The medium, the what is going on in these kind of filters is very simple. We put in there two types of material. We put in a layer of polyester fiber, which has many, many names: filter, floss, fluff, all that kind of thing. It's polyester fiber. All pet shops handle it. Five and Dimes handle it as pillow stuffing. You can use nylons and achieve the same purpose. What this does is when the water comes out of the aquarium, dirty water now, comes out of the aquarium, this is what takes the lumps out. This is physical filtering. Now, you look at the municipal water plant approach to this, and they have layers of sand, gravel that continually get finer and finer. And they take out the lumps by passing water through a natural filter, if you will, of gravel. But this takes out the dirt. The next thing it passes through is charcoal. This is one type of charcoal, and it's activated carbon is what it is. Don't use coal. Don't use anything other than what you would buy as fine grade carbon or charcoal, because it can contain some rather toxic things if you try to take shortcuts. Now, it goes through this or this, because there are many different types of stuff available at the pet shops, passes through the charcoal, which takes out the chemicals, takes out the discoloration in the water, does this step of it. So you can see that those two little filters that I showed you, which are low on the order of efficiency in terms of how good a job they do, you can see that they do both of these jobs. Early in the game, that's what's going on. Now, I just might mention in passing that besides those which are operated by an air pump, whoops, I just broke my toe, but got a lot of them. An air pump like this, an air pump like this. When you go to the pet shop to get an air pump, you're going to find enough to dazzle you. You won't know how to select them. But the air pump runs the filter, like we see going on in the corner of this aquarium. And it also provides air through the air stone, like we see going on in the other corner of it. So the air pump is merely, as it says, pumping air into the aquarium. Now, I mention that because the filters that I just showed you, plus the under gravel filter, which we're going to talk about in a minute, are run by air pumps. There are outside filters that have a motor attached to them like this. And this is dirty, and because I use them all the time around here. With that pack of aquariums we got in the back room, I need filters going on. So, but the basic operation of these, whether they're driven by an air pump or a motor, is water through the glass wool and through the charcoal. And let's stop right there initially and say at least we're doing this. We're doing this much of the filtering job. Okay? Now, there are some other things to consider. One of them is exchange of gases. That's why we aerate the water. That's why that air stone is always bubbling, to allow oxygen to re-enter the water, carbon dioxide to pass out of the water. Both of these are critical. Generally, we think all we need is oxygen, but carbon dioxide getting out of the water is a lot of times more critical than oxygen getting in. Oxygen goes in easily. So we find the filters, and let me show you one that approaches that particular problem. Take this part of it out. This would hang on the back here, like so, on the aquarium, and it does the filtering. Certainly does these kind of filterings very well. But this particular one is designed with an eye toward this gas exchange, because the overflow of the water back into the aquarium is along this entire edge, as we see it here. The water just overflows and runs back into the aquarium like that, all along there. Why is that something we want to consider? Primarily because the more surface we have and the thinner that layer of water, the better this gaseous exchange goes on. So you want to make sure that you have in your mind that you want to be disturbing the surface of the aquarium, or you want to be exposing the return water to as much interplay with the air as possible. Don't shoot that jet. Don't bury the neck of the jet from your filter, your water back into the aquarium jet. Don't bury it in the water. The best thing you can do is rile it up. In fact, you saw your fish in trouble. Let's say the power goes out or something and all the fish start. Nothing wrong with this. Nothing wrong with that. That's oxygenation. That's getting the carbon dioxide out. I wouldn't want to stand there, every day and do that very long. But that's the kind of thing we're talking about. Disturb that water surface. Very critical. Now, oh boy, look here in this big tank. If you're going to keep big fish, if you're going to keep these big cichlids, you've got to get used to what they want to do. Right in the middle, I just put that plant in there. You see that plastic plant floating there in the middle? I just planted that thing, if you will, stuck it back in the gravel right before we started to shoot. And I put it back near the back, but that's where Rotten Ralph hangs around, and he's not having any plants. And cichlid behaviorism, that's another story, but that goes on all the time. Now, we've talked about basically filtration, not so much about filters, because you're going to find what kind of filters are available when you go to the pet shop. We're talking more about the notion, if you will. So let's look at another type of filter. This is a filter plate from a typical under gravel filter. And the theory behind this is that you bury it in the gravel. When I set the aquarium up, this is going to be buried in the gravel. Now, this particular one has a discharge tube, which if I turn this, I guess we can see that maybe a little better. But the water is now going to pass through the gravel in the aquarium, down through the filter, and be pumped back up out of this tube that is formed by the corner of the aquarium and that plastic sleeve that's in there. And what'll pump it up? Air from the little air pump. And we can see that going on over in this aquarium here. That's what we were looking at a little earlier. It's the same type of filter operating in this corner. The secret to the success of these kind of filters is how much water they move. But what they're doing in moving water in this fashion is passing oxygen-rich water down through the gravel. Now, there are many different types of these. Some of them, most of them, discharge through a round tube like that back into the aquarium. In fact, the big aquarium that we've been looking at so often has this particular type of filter in it. And the stems are as high as the aquarium. Why? So I am shooting that water out along the top of the aquarium. I want to get that interchange of the surface for oxygen carbon dioxide interchange that I talked about before. So that's important. Now, how does the operation of this filter compare with the other types that we've been looking at? Basically, what we're getting into is this area of the game, biological filtration. Now, you notice the very name implies life as compared to these. And that's the secret. The biological filter is one in which a jillion bacteria are living that do a special job of converting poisonous things that go into the water. Now, we don't want to get into that. We've talked about that before. But the exciting thing about it is that it's a natural filter. It's a filter that develops in the aquarium with aging of the aquarium. And once the population has stabilized, and hopefully without any losses, that's what we're aiming for, then the bacteria culture has built up to a level that will continually take care of these toxic materials, these poisonous materials that the fish themselves are putting into the aquarium. You should think they'd get a little smarter, but they have no problem in a rushing river in the big ocean. They don't have to be concerned about what's going into the water. So a live filter, if you will, a biological filter. The concept is what's important. It's necessary. It's absolutely necessary to the saltwater aquarium. It's, to my way of thinking, something you would never consider otherwise. Biological filtration. Now, I don't want to give you the impression, let's say, that that's the only biological filtration going on. It's not. It's not. Even a little filter like this, one of these little corner filters, as it gets dirty, becomes a biological filter in a sense, because these bacteria that we're talking about adhere to any surface in the aquarium. Any surface. So the charcoal, for instance, in that filter is just a beautiful culture of these necessary bacteria. What happens when you decide to change that filter and get it out and scrub it up immaculately clean and throw everything out? You lose the benefit of that. So fine, maybe throw out the fibers that we're talking about. Throw out half of the charcoal and put half new fibers. Don't clean the filter. Let it look a little tacky. Tacky is good. Tacky are the nice guy bacteria. Put that in there. The same thing in this filter. If you decide to change, clean it up a little bit, I think it's time kind of a concept. All filters become biological filters as they age because they start supporting the bacterial growth that we're talking about. Now, You say, well, how much of filtration do I need? That's something you're going to have to find out by experience. Because if you started, for instance, with a 30-gallon aquarium, pick a number, and started out keeping wee little fish don't put so much dirt, so much poison, so much anything into the water as the animals over there. You know, if you put in a fish like that big Oscar, you know, he's an armful. You'd have to cradle him like a little dog. He's 15 inches long. When you start putting big fish into an aquarium, the problem compounds, and it compounds very rapidly. So, different kinds of filtration. This particular aquarium here, which has half a dozen various common fish in, has one of these under gravel filters. Now, this one has been set up for a while, I don't know, maybe a couple months on here. So when I expose this filter, we should expect to see the dirt that is in the gravel bed that is being decomposed. We should expect to see that rile up a little bit. We should see a little bit of a cloud of dust come out of there. Now, that's not too bad. Apparently, we're getting, well, see, now here again, now that you can see the filter buried in there, but here again, what this reflects is that normally I don't have a very big fish load in here in terms of population. There's a little more dirt where we run out at the end of the filter, but you can see that plate buried down in there. If I had this thing stocked the way you do at home, that is a lot of fish in there, then we would expect to see a lot more dirt come up out of that. This brings us to an issue that I see an awful lot in the mail and get people calling about, and that's the fact that there seems to be a divergence of opinion between experts. Well, everybody does things their own way, and if they're successful, then they say that is the right way. Well, the plain fact of the matter is there are alternate approaches to these various theories. And you know, when you get that itchy feeling in the beginning because, geez, I don't know anything, I better do exactly what they say, and a year later, you're a pro yourself, and you have your own experience to fall back on. Well, you know, a question that comes up quite often, for instance, is the kind of thing, if I'm going to siphon water and change water, that's a must. We talked about that. Should I rile up the gravel? Well, you get a number of answers to that one. My answer to that is this. That gravel contains the worst stuff that's in the aquarium as it's being worked on. Also contains your bacteria. The good guys are down in there. But if you riled up all that gravel in an old aquarium and suddenly floated free that cloud of junk, you could do in your fish. And you probably would do in any delicate ones. However, if from the time you set it up, every time you made a water change, you riled it up, then that bed never gets to the point where it's a problem. You could probably do it in that sense. So there's a lot of iffiness to this. It's not so much of what you do, but there got to be a little bit of thought behind it. So if we're going at the setup of the aquarium, we would put this filter in here, set it up. In this particular one, you tack it in the corner with silicone, and you can buy that at the pet shop. Comes like so. And at the same time, think about this. If you're going to want to put an air stone into that setup, well, you hook it up. But before you put the water in, let's run this air hose on the aquarium and glue that with the same stuff, with that same silicone into the corner of the aquarium, like I'm doing here, or maybe down into this corner if it interferes with the filter, like so. And that way, when I finally get done with the setup, I don't have a lot of claptrap running through the aquarium. I don't see that air hose hanging out into the middle of the aquarium because it's very easy once I have everything in place. And remember now, in actual practice, this would be tacked into the corner. It's very easy to get to that point of the game, cover the filter, put it in its place, and then as I set this up, as I'm doing my magic here, I bury the air line also. So, and leave the stone exposed like that, just the stone, but I bury the air line. Now when I continue on into the setup here, the placement of a rock over that, like so, hides even the air stone, depending on the extent there. You can see it just sticking up there a little bit, and I get a natural bubbling coming up from that. So filters out of sight, air lines are out of sight. I end up with a nice clean picture, if you will. And then, I get around, I put the water in, I pour it on something, even on that rock, or certainly on a plate, and I put most of the water in, and pretty soon I'm to the stage that I am in the bigger aquarium here. And then I just came back from the pet shop, and I open up my bag of plants, and I rinse them off, and I start placing the furniture. And this particular plant here is that's a bog fern of sorts, does well underwater, comes from Borneo, that kind of thing, a very delicate, very nice plant. And I plant the aquarium to suit my tastes. This is one of the spathiphyllum here that I'm planting, and I've got one of these growing at home with a beautiful blossom on as big as a teacup right now, growing out of the water. And, of course, bunch plants like the hydrilla here, we just put them in the background for emphasis, or we let them float. And the aquarium starts to take on a personality that pleases us. Now, I'm in the back here, and I can't really see what I did so far, but what happens to the aquarium is what you do to it. All it has to do is keep you happy. And when you're setting up, you use size so it matches the fish. You wouldn't put that in there. Say, boy, look at that beautiful rock. Oh, it's beautiful. That's a beautiful rock. There's no question about it. But you sure wouldn't put that into a 10-gallon aquarium, regardless of the beauty. So you set it up to suit me. If I've got the water right, and we talked about the feeding, if I've got that right, the fish are happy. And if I've set it up to suit me, I'm happy. Everybody's happy. Could only happen here. Beautiful system. So a little planning ahead, a little thought into what you do, and conscientiousness regarding water quality, water care, and feeding, you're home free. Everybody stays happy.